politics are just destroying relationships left and right, and not just, marriages and romantic relationships, but friends, families, colleagues, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you so much for joining us today on Second Act TV. I am so happy to introduce you to our guests today, probably one of the most interesting couples that I've ever come across.
Or that we've ever come across.
Author and political journalist Richard Brookhiser, and psychotherapist and the author of I Love You, But I Hate Your Politics, Dr. Jeanne Safer. Richard, Jeanne, thank you so much for joining us today.
Delighted.
Let me paint a picture here just a little bit more about, who you are, why you're here, and what we're going to talk about. I mean, it's no secret that politics are just destroying relationships left and right, and not just, marriages and romantic relationships, but friends, families, colleagues, et cetera, et cetera.
It's a nightmare.
It's an absolute nightmare. And you, Richard, you are a respected journalist and author. You are a historian. And you have been, I think for, nearly 40 years, a senior editor at National Review, founded by William F. Buckley, who, if I have this right, was even your mentor, your protege. So point being, we can safely put you on the right here. You're on the right.
Well, I was a visitor to all of this, of course, for years.
Yeah, exactly. Jeanne, you're not. No. You're not a Republican. You're a self-admitted, lifelong liberal who feels very strongly about, the core issues really that divide the two political parties. Yet, the two of you have managed to, have this wonderful relationship. You've been married for over 40 years. So that's what we want to talk about today. Give us all some hope. How did you make it work? And I guess the obvious first question, how did you kids ever meet?
Well, we met in a singing group.
This is what you have to do to make it work. Mm-hmm. We're both we both can sing, and this is a group in New York City called the Renaissance Street Singers of New York. And then we met on Sundays and sang Renaissance religious music all over the city.
Because it was wonderful music.
It's gorgeous music.
So, Grand Central Station, the Staten Island Ferry,
street corners. The police moved us on occasionally. we had about 15 people.
Yeah, yeah. 12, 15 people, never took any money,
That's funny. Well, so the point being then, you didn't, politics, you didn't know where you guys were. How did that enter?
Oh, we knew.
We figured it out.
Oh, you did? Quick. Okay, tell me about that.
Well, you asked me, where do you work? And I said, well, I work for National Review. So that
I work for Bill Buckley. I figured out, it wasn't hard. And so I remember saying or thinking, oh, that's interesting. And I didn't say, well, I'm never talking to this guy, because he was obviously smart. He had a beautiful voice. He had those eyes, as you can see. And
I was a writer.
Yes.
I mean, for National Review, but I was a writer. So you like that.
I like that, yes. And it's interesting. It opened a world to me that I never would have been in. As a visitor. And what was really interesting to me is how graciously I was accepted by people that I would have assumed would be obnoxious. Mm. And in fact, what was particularly interesting, and I could say it now after all these years, guess who was obnoxious? The people I knew.
Well, that was actually one of my questions. So when you're at social gatherings and people know who you are, I mean, you're well-known people. Is that difficult when you're especially at a gathering when you're there for?
Well, we've been doing it for a lot of years now.
Mostly not, but there were a few early on, like Jeanne was saying.
Oh, the one where Rick was called a crypto-Nazi. Well, I have to say, I did something that I really feel is I'm proud of, and that every mixed couple, if there are any in this world anymore, needs to do. You must defend your spouse. If somebody says something obnoxious like, "Oh, you're married to a Nazi,"
Right, or
your,
oh, what a commie, you know,
it
something
is
like
your,
that.
it is your, you must tell that person off.
You cut them a new one.
So you're diametrically opposed politically, obviously.
We've never voted for the same person except once.
Yeah, Giuliani.
Once.
Oh, really? Okay, that's interesting. Especially
Not now.
especially
Right.
talking today.
This was the old.
Yeah.
So here, with all these people who are just, it's almost impossible to have political discussions. How did you handle that? How do you handle and not fly off the handle when you feel so strongly about your beliefs?
Well, you have to learn how to talk and what to say, and even more important, what not to say. Like, how on earth can you even be in the same room with somebody who doesn't accept abortion? This is not what you do, right?
Right. Sentences like, how can you believe? That's probably a sentence
Not a
you
good
don't
way to
want to
start.
say. Or article thrusting.
Oh,
favorite.
yes. I made up a word. The world is entitled to it. I called it article thrusting. I'm going to show you if you don't already. Okay. Here's a person. Read this. Read this. Read this. This will tell you the truth.
Because people do that. You know, for Jeanne's book, she interviewed a number of, you know, lots of people who were in these relationships, friendly, family, whatever. And there was one couple, these two young women, and and one of them, you know, sent her friend PowerPoints. Like that's going to persuade her.
Well, the most fun I ever had with this. What was the morning show? Some TV show.
Morning Joe.
Morning Joe.
Morning
Yeah.
Joe.
So I wanted to tell them about how you should deal with if you're married or if you have a friend who has a different position. So there was a table full of newspapers. So I took one of the newspapers, and there was somebody sitting next to me and said, "Here, read this, read this, read this."
She was demonstrating what not
to do.
Because there's, you know, people will think, well, if they just see this bit of information, then I'll break through. They'll see the light.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a very common frame of mind, but it doesn't work.
But it not only doesn't it work, but it's incredibly offensive and obnoxious.
Yeah.
You know, the fact is, what you want to do is say, "Tell me about what you think and why you think it." I mean, if you want to have a conversation, you know. And so I ended up not expecting it, but I ended up spending a lot of my middle age with people who didn't agree with me at all. And I learned something very interesting. They can be excellent friends. They can care about you. They can come and see you in the hospital. And they can do a lot of things that the people who agree with you don't do.
Yeah.
So this was my education.
You know, you and I, Jeanne, we had a pre-call to this interview, and that's one thing you said that just hit home with me. And I mean, I read your book, and I have all these markings. I don't even know where they are.
But you didn't read the Chinese version.
I know. This is what Amazon sent me, but the what was so I just think was profound, because you know, my boyfriend and I, we find ourselves in that. We are on the same side politically, but we find ourselves in that all the time with friends, good friends, and it's like, how can they believe this? How can they think this? And you just made me see, your book, what you said made me see. You can. It's more than just politics. Talk to me about that.
Because actually, there are people that I know, many people who agree with me politically.
Yeah.
And who have betrayed me, who haven't been good friends, who you can't rely on. You know, politics, sharing politics says nothing about what kind of a person you are. I hate to say it. I wish it wasn't true. But
I mean,
it is.
we came up with a phrase, the cancer test. You know, because
the chemotherapy test.
Well, yeah, the same thing. We've each had cancer at different times, and it's who's going to come? Who's going to come see you in the hospital? Well, you know, people will do that, and they don't all agree with you.
And it doesn't. Politics is not what defines who shows up.
Mhm.
That was really a revelation.
Yeah.
It doesn't define it.
It does. That, yeah, again, that totally makes sense, because I could so relate to that, and as everybody else, I'm sure listening can as well. If I can ask maybe a little on a personal level, what happened? I mean, obviously you're happily married, you're 40 years, my goodness, that in and of itself is a
Longer
compliment.
than 40 years.
42.
42 years. Don't forget those last 2 years.
But no marriage, whether mixed, politically mixed or not, is without challenges. What have been your biggest challenges? How did you overcome that maybe our audience can identify with in these situations?
Yeah, my parents were very difficult. Much more difficult. I mean, Jeanne's father died before I met her, but her mother, I had a fine relationship with her mother. My parents were tough.
And my mother was very liberal, but she adored Rick.
So was that something that you just didn't talk about it? I mean, is that the solution?
Well, we lived in different cities.
That was helpful.
It also diminished my relationship with them.
Unfortunately.
Which is an unfortunate effect. But if as a parent you do that, it's going to have an effect on your child.
I know how to have a relationship without talking about politics. I've been doing it for many, many years. I mean, I remember Rick was Bill Buckley's protege. And at Bill's 80th birthday, I sat next to him for the whole dinner, and it was delightful. I mean, you don't have to talk about politics with people. And one of the things that I learned from having to go, know these people is that a lot of people who don't agree with me politically are better friends than people who agree with me politically. And this was really a revelation, because I think we have certain prejudices that anybody who believes such and such can't be a good friend.
But you had a couple boyfriends before you met me. I mean, there was
one
guy who. Well, there was this one.
I'm 8 years older than he is, for God's sake.
Yeah. There was this one guy who you checked all the boxes of resemblance, but he was a bastard. So that happens.
Yes. You find out what's important and what's not, and it's not what somebody's politics is; it's how they treat you. And what part I mean, if you have different politics and the person lets you alone and doesn't expect you to change, who cares?
I think that's another thing that you said, and a big lesson is don't ever expect to change anybody by talking politics or by what you say. That is never, ever going to happen. People can change, but not because you just said something and, now I'm a Republican.
That is the most important thing in any relationship. If you go and try to change a person, all you will do is get them to hate you. That's what you'll accomplish.
Right. People obviously, like you said, they do change their minds, but they change on their own speed. They process the information themselves in their own heads and in their own way. And, maybe you have some effect on this process, but it's not because you sat them down and said, here, look, here's the truth. Here's the killer argument, or here's the thing you must read.
Yeah. So if for those listening, watching, if you're going through this, just don't talk about it. I mean, is that
that's another thing. There's
people don't get that.
There's both ways to talk about it. I mean, one way we found we could talk about politics as a process. Boy, this guy, that was an own goal, right? He really kicked the soccer ball into his own goal on that one. You can do that. But also you have to know when to not say anything at all. That certain issues are so radioactive, or certain personalities, and so you just leave them aside.
Or you find a way to talk about it. I mean,
but I think more often not talking about it
is the way.
Is the better strategy.
Right.
I mean, obviously you learned a lot of this throughout, your marriage, your relationship. Was there ever a time when it was really difficult and, to where you got like, what, I don't know, this might be.
I think the hardest thing, it was never a question of we can't stay married. But I think abortion was the most difficult for me
Mm.
because I felt very passionately about it. And I knew that Rick had the opposite position. And we just decided that that was the way it was. And I never said, how could you think? Or, that's the thing. You have to learn what not to say.
Yeah.
There was a story in the Times like just yesterday, I think, and it was about people complaining or saying how their relationships had been ruined by politics. And there was one person who got in trouble because on Facebook, she was like teasing friends who liked Donald Trump. She'd bring up bad stories about him or embarrassing stories about
Not
him.
difficult.
And she said, well, but wait, she said I couldn't help myself.
Mm-hmm.
And well, yes, you can.
Yes,
It's
you
very
can.
easy to help yourself to not post something on Facebook. You
Yes.
just don't do it.
Yes.
Now,
People don't
look,
get this.
I understand that social media is very easy to do
It's
because
compelling.
you're just sitting there and you just click and then off it goes. But by the same token, it's also very easy not to do it.
Right.
No one is forcing you to go onto that platform and click the button. You can just like not do it.
Yeah.
So why not do it?
Because if you don't not do it, you can destroy relationships.
Exactly.
Really.
Oh, so
That's right. That's right. Well, and what you think is just like a funny joke or maybe even a killer joke. And then people, they feel disrespected, they feel angry, they get defensive about someone they admire or something that's important to them.
Right.
And boom, then you're off to the races.
Yeah. Every now and then, I especially over the last 3 years, you see something, that would be really fun to share, yeah, I get it. And then I've caught myself thinking that, how would I feel though if so-and-so saw that? And then you just don't. I stay away from all of that, period.
You're virtually unique by asking that question. I mean, it seems to me, how can you not ask those questions unless you have, which most people now have, a group of friends that exactly agrees with them politically?
Mm-hmm.
They think. How dull.
Yeah, as long as you don't start attacking each other. Like Richard, I think I would love to have you over for dinner and talk. Yeah, I mean, how interesting is that? And it is you and as along with so many other people who we disagree with, bring so many interesting things to the table that we would miss out on otherwise. So I know that for me personally, I know for my boyfriend, we just do our best, At what point though, and here's my question, at what point is it like, okay, you know what? I can't do it. Is there a litmus test where you just would advise somebody, walk away from this?
Now there are some points of view which themselves require the people who hold them to be continually absorbed in them. And that almost
awful.
always means that you got to break it off with that person.
Yeah.
But those are frankly rare. I mean, they're fringy things. They're rare. They're oddball things. Most people, it's quite possible to find the other areas where you can talk, or where you're very precious to each other or very valuable to each other.
And you can also say, look, let's stay away from politics. Mm-hmm. Why not say that?
Yeah, we do. It's like, we love you guys, but if we're going to talk about this, we just can't. We want to be together, but let's not talk about this because we're just going to disagree. Let me ask one other, whatever bit of advice you might give. I mean, you met at a time where there was no social media, politics certainly, I mean, throughout the years, yes, it's escalated down and up. I think you probably both agreed politically is maybe at the worst right now. And with social media and online dating, which a lot of our viewers do, it's cover that a lot. Oh my goodness, has that come up over and over and over. And before talking with you, reading your book, I would tell people, you know what, it's just not worth it to start a relationship from the, if you're not on the same page politically as heated as it is.
I think it depends on how important politics is to you, to a person. I mean, you can have different politics and it's not your fundamental thing. I mean, for instance, I think if we hadn't both been singers, it probably would have been somewhat different, don't you think?
Well, right. That was a good way to meet, because
Yeah.
because it was something we shared and something we both enjoyed and that
Yeah,
we were
that
good
we did
at.
about 15 hours a week.
Well, here's the thing. Yes, politics is very rancid now, but let me say this as a historian.
Mhm.
It's been as bad, it's been worse.
Mm.
I write a lot of books about the founding era, the beginning of the country. If you want crazy politics, you have to go back to the founding
1700s.
fathers, right? As soon as they won their independence, and they all said, "Oh, I don't agree, and I don't want a political party. I don't want to belong to a political party." I mean, Jefferson said, "If I had to belong to a political party, I'd rather, be dead." Well, but then, so what? So what did they immediately do? They immediately
Made
set
political
up
parties.
2 political parties, and it was crazy then, and it was worse, frankly. I
Mhm.
remember
That's comforting.
when Vice President Cheney shot that guy. They were like
Yes.
hunting. Okay,
Yes.
that was an accident, and he lived. When Vice President Aaron Burr shot Alexander Hamilton in a duel, it was not an accident, and
He
Hamilton
died.
was killed. I mean, people killed each other over politics then.
Mhm.
Thank God we don't do that
Right.
now. So it has been worse. And then what drives me crazy is when people say we have a cultural civil war. We actually had a civil war.
Yeah, it's
And
different from a cultural civil war.
750,000 men were killed. So just bear that in mind as a marker when,
It's
when
better
you're
now, that's what
feeling
you're
when you're
saying.
feeling
Yeah.
like, oh, we're in a civil war. No, we're not.
Wow. What a great way to put that into perspective, Richard. That's terrific. I never thought of it that way.
It helps to have a historian around the house.
Absolutely. Well, and I'm going to link to all your books. When I did a little research on you, my gosh, I mean, yeah, you're something else there. We're starting to come to the end. I mean, I've had so many questions. We could talk about this forever. What I'd like to ask is, I mean, you do a lot of these interviews. Pretty much we all ask the same questions to some degree. Is there something you wish you might be asked, or something that, this is what I'd like to tell your audience. This is the advice I'd like to give. Anything come to mind when I say that?
Character is not just political opinions.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we used to call the most important thing the chemotherapy test.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, who shows up when you're lying in bed, which we both have done, getting chemotherapy, who shows up and takes care of you? That's what counts.
Remember when Ronald Reagan was shot and they took him to the hospital, and he was like cracking jokes, and he said to the doctors, he said, "Well, I hope you're all Republicans." And the surgeon said, "We're all Republicans, Mr. President," meaning it doesn't count here.
To have places that it doesn't count is very, very important.
Yeah. And one of the places, obviously, is relationships, if you can manage it. And you two are, well, a living, breathing example that it can. And even in this conversation, the feeling I get is like, it's just not that big of a deal. Don't make such a big deal out of it. Would you agree with that?
Well, I can also make another suggestion, which if you're married to somebody or have a good, a close friend who disagrees with you and you admire that person and so forth, you can learn from them.
Also, neither of us is saying that politics is unimportant.
Right.
These questions are important questions, and they have important consequences for the country and for society, and some of them, very important.
Right.
But you always do have to remember that there are other things going on. There are other things in life that are also important, and also important to you and to the people you love.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much for your time today. I think this is such an important conversation, and you really are.
There you go.
Yes. I mean, you are, gosh, you just exemplified that this can, you can do this. You don't have to destroy, your relationships. The book
the
is
essential thing.
I love you, but I hate your politics. God, pick this up, read it. And, I'm going to put up another graphic because I think you have a different cover for it as well. And Jeannie, I want to talk with you specifically about the book on another segment.
Sure.
So let me close us out. Richard, thank you again. It was an honor to have you on Second Act, both
thank
of you.
you.
And I'll hope to see you again soon on Second
Sure.
Act.
All righty. Thanks.
If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe to our channel. The button is right here. Just click on through to YouTube, and when you see the little bell right next to the subscribe button, hit that too, and we'll notify you every time we launch a new video. See you next time.